I started listening to him because he destroyed.
Can you blow my whistle, baby, let me know. Girl, I'm gonna show you how to do it, and we start real slow. You just put your lips together and you come real close. Can you blow my whistle, baby, here we go.
So next part, knowing what needs to be clarified is the missing skill as opposed to the clarifications that are missing themselves. That is the biggest difference between the autist and the neurotypical in that particular domain. The neurotypical knows that there might be certain things that need to be clarified, even if they are not completely clarified at a given point in time. So is it okay if I sit here? Like, they know to ask that question. It's a very important difference. So the neurotypical and the autist might walk into a room. Neither of them might know where is the appropriate place to sit. But the neurotypical will say, is it okay if I sit here? They'll know to ask. The autist won't ask. They won't even know that they don't know. That's the problem. So then what I would have normally done was walk into a room and just sit down, because why wouldn't I sit on a desk? Because it is a flat surface, I can sit there. And then other people will look at you, because what happens is by sitting on the desk, you're raised up higher than other people. And so therefore it's socially aggressive behavior. Now I've had to learn that, as I said before, that is not something intuitive to the autist. When I leave the house, it's like I'm in a dense forest with thick branches everywhere I look. And every time I move, I have to keep moving a branch and I don't know which way to actually go. What he said was that for others, they're still in a dense forest, but there are some parts that are less dense than others. So they can sort of know in which rough direction to navigate. The autist does not have that. And sometimes an autist, as a response, could freeze if they're in a crowd, because they don't know what to do at all. There was a time when my ex-fiance, many years ago, before I even was diagnosed, took me to meet her friends, and they put little brownies on the table, and they were so good that I just went to the table and went, hum, hum. And I just kept eating them all in front of everybody. And then it turns out they were all looking at me, which I didn't notice at the time, because I didn't know to look for that. And they're like, what's wrong with this guy? Why is he just eating them like the Cookie Monster? That's one of those things that a neurotypical might ask, is it okay if I have one? Yeah, it's a hilarious story. It's happened to me more than once, ladies and gentlemen. Let's move on. The consequence of getting it wrong is more for the autist, for myself. I can give you an example. Why would I need to worry about what other people think if I didn't think that? This is one of the autist deficiencies. But the problem is that the consequence in that case is quite cataclysmic. Now, depending on my domain of discourse, now we're going to move into the unusual, uneven distribution problem of the savant brain. Now, so for those of you who don't know me, they know that I was diagnosed as a savant, which is, it took me years to believe it, because number one, it just seems ridiculous. And number two, it doesn't feel like what I'm doing is not usual. Now I've come to learn that it is. For example, as those know, I listen to a YouTube video in 1.5 speed, and then Honest Joe walks past me. How can you listen to this? Your brain too fast. And then I will memorize, somewhere between 75 and 95% of the material, and then dish it back out down the track in the future. I have to be clear that this is not me that's doing this. I didn't choose to have this ability. And it is almost like someone put a computer chip in my head that allows me to do those type of things. And so it is to be kept separate from what one thinks of themselves ego-wise. It's something to be appreciated, and therefore what comes with it is responsibility. And that responsibility is to use the amount of knowledge that my brain is able to develop very quickly to then chew up or pass and then distribute, therefore providing them extra choices in life because they have extra information they would not have usually had. There is a problem with the uneven distribution of my brain power. Well, one is I actually don't have a standard IQ, because some parts of my brain, like being able to draw, is below average. And yet other parts like pattern seeking, logic, and mathematics are beyond almost any human being on the planet. That is through various studies which continue. And so depending upon my domain of discourse, I'm either a genius or a moron. And so it's very hard to conceptualize what it is that one person is on let's say a low resolution scale. And I said to the doctor, it's sort of like, from one side, if I was a car, I'm a Ferrari. And on the other side, I'm missing 2 wheels. And it depends on which side you're standing. I either look like a high performance car or a broken down piece of junk. It's confusing to see that I possess these qualities, but am also missing assumed knowledge. That was his words. He said, so basically what you're missing is assumed knowledge. And that's where the problem is, because society expects that some knowledge is assumed by the general populace. And of course, by definition, if it's assumed on average, then you will always be guaranteed given enough people to find someone who does not possess that knowledge. And that person will be unlikely, but they're guaranteed to exist. Is pride ever justified? Okay, the answer, that's another beautiful question. Everyone who doesn't know Liran is a born journalist pretending to be an amazing artist. And he does both exceptionally well. So is pride ever justified? I say pride is a tool, and a tool can be used to your benefit or to your detriment. Is it important that I believe in myself for certain situations? Yes, because otherwise I would not be able to do a theoretical physics thesis after only doing a degree in 2 years. I would not have had the confidence to complete it. So for that reason, pride is a tool to say, I look forward to being proud of what I know I can do. But in terms of assuming that somehow it makes you a better person in general, and therefore can make it very difficult to handle criticism, it becomes a problem. So someone with an IQ of, say, 150 would be smarter than most of the population in all parts of their brain. So their ability to view, their ability to memorize, their ability to listen, their ability to taste, their ability to draw, their speed of calculations. In my case, I don't have speed. My speed in calculations is average. In other words, just a regular, normal person. But my ability to hold pieces of information in my head is above almost anyone on the planet. But if you average it across the brain, it doesn't make any sense, because then my average is like indeterminate, because I have such a low functioning part in one section, really high in another section. And it's normally when information comes through the ears, which is why I listen to a lot of lectures on YouTube. Prodigious savants develop in different ways. So there are some there's one in the UK called Daniel Tammet, who, like myself, can hear 12 numbers and know them off by heart. However, he can learn a language in a few hours. For me, it takes me about 20 hours. So he's faster than me in that point, but he can't drive. I'm a bus driver. They have unique abilities in different places. There are twins who are autistic savants who can memorize exact dates way quicker than me. So I can tell you, for example, multiples of 7 in September should be on a Friday. Am I right on that? What's that? The 5th is today, which is Wednesday, 6th, 7th. Yeah, it is. That takes me a while to figure it out, and I'm like only 80% sure when I do it. Whereas some people can know immediately, but they can't feed themselves. I can feed myself. I'll give you another example. Like when I was 10 years old, I scored a perfect score at the Conservatory of New South Wales, but I can't read music. I can only listen to music and memorize it. But if you ask me to read music, I literally can't read music, and I studied it for years. So it shows you like that the visual part of my brain is not really that developed. All this week, I've been talking to you guys about narratives and the competing various contradictory narratives, and therefore from those comes the super narrative, which is the synthesis of the other two, similar to Hegel's dialectic. And then the super narrative needs to be dynamic so that it can always be chasing after the meta narrative, which is the ultimate truth that we may never be able to get to, if it even exists. And then he said, what you haven't done is apply that to yourself. You've been applying various conflicting narratives. He's either a genius or a moron. Well, actually, you're neither. You are someone who is able to compute certain things in certain domains and not in others. So think of yourself as maybe like a half Ferrari, half Toyota Prius, you know? The narrative that one applies to their observations must be accurate, which is more important than either believing or disbelieving the hype. I thought that was quite brilliant from the doctor, because growing up with abuse, I underestimated myself. It doesn't mean I have to flip it around now when I realize all of these talents that I've been given via evolution or God or whatever it is, and then go, oh yeah, I'm awesome. No, you detach yourself from these evolutionary abilities that have been generated. So you disconnect yourself from the hype by realizing that it's a tool that you can use, but it's not who you are. And that's the narrative that you apply to yourself. It's much more important to find a narrative that's accurate as opposed to one that predicts that you would do something in a certain situation which would be incorrect. So if you think, for example, you're so amazing, and then you go down to your next door neighbor's house and you think you're amazing, and then you say something really, really insulting without realizing, which has happened a lot to me. And then they call you out and they insult you and they say you should know better. Well, if I believed that I was all round brilliant, then yes, I should have known better. But if one accepts a more accurate narrative, which is it's a mix of the two, then you don't feel as bad. You're like, oh, I stuffed up. I need to be more careful to make sure I don't stuff up as much. If your ego takes you over, you lose that precautionary type of behavior. I actually suffered massive depression when I became really successful, to the point where I was on radio around Sydney and people would know me. Not many, but like 1 in 10 people would be, oh, you're urban legend, blah, blah, blah. And whenever I went to a party, like people would come from other parties because they knew I was DJing one party or something like that. It actually created depression at the time, because I started to realize that people loved me for this front that I had created. Because at school I was quite tortured, and having a friend was very unlikely. And so it actually increased the depression. So I quit DJing. Who knows? I could have been unbelievably successful in that, but I decided to stop. It was only years later that I realized that my deduction that they only liked the front was incorrect. What they liked was me, but I was able to finally express who I was via the DJing. And so their caring for me was actually significant. And so therefore, the conclusion that I came to was incorrect. It was the wrong narrative. That narrative led to depression, which led to me quitting DJing.
Staring at the world through my rear view. Go away, baby, scream to God. He can't hear you. I can feel your heart beating fast. Guess it's time to die. Getting high, watching time fly. While we'll be staring at the world through my rear view. Go away, baby, scream to God. He can't hear you. I can feel your heart beating fast. Guess it's time to die. Getting high, watching time fly. You know, they got me staring at the world through my rear view. Go away, baby, scream to God.